Second observation is that she's revealing that when James Comey basically laid out the case as to why Hillary Clinton was guilty of committing the criminal offense of gross negligence as it concerns classified information, but they decided not to prosecute the case, she's literally confirming that that is what happened. They have the facts and have the information and decide to treat the facts as if they are different than what they really are. The third observation is her saying the Department of Justice recommended or instructed the FBI that they would not provide any charges.
Hamilton went on to say that the greatest travesty here is that a fraud has been perpetuated on the American people.
And here we are standing and languishing based on the fact that we literally have a two-tier justice system.
More legal news at onenewsnow.com. The U.S. and China continue working toward a trade deal. Fox Business Network's Edward Lawrence reports from New York.
U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer talked via teleconference with his counterpart in China. The U.S. Trade Representative says there are still major differences that need to be overcome. He also says China has agreed to have enforcement in a deal. The issue, though, continues to be the pace of change. The Chinese are in the final stages of making law a provision that bans government agencies and employees from demanding trade secrets. That signals a protection for intellectual property, but they have not addressed the forced partnerships, also state-owned businesses and government subsidies. The Trump administration now backing off, saying a deal could be done in March. April also looking iffy. In Washington, Edward Lawrence, Fox News.
It's hard to forget bad memories. Fox's Joy Piazza explains in today's House Call for Health.
It can be hard to remember certain things, but it can be even harder to forget. A new study finds it takes more mental energy to unremember something, especially if it's something big. For instance, the pitcher who gives up the game-winning home run may want to put that moment out of his head. And more seriously, researchers say people who experience traumatic events can benefit if they can stop thinking about what happened. The researchers say there is a, quote, sweet spot of brain activity needed to actively forget something. They say if you try too hard, it will only strengthen the memory. I'm Joy Piazza, Fox News.
In other news this hour, U.S. health regulators are moving ahead with a plan they say is designed to keep e-cigarettes out of the hands of teenagers by restricting sales of most flavored products in convenience stores and online. The new guidelines, first proposed in November, are the latest government effort to reverse what health officials call an epidemic of underage vaping. E-cigarettes typically heat a flavored nicotine solution into an inhalable vapor. Federal law bans their sale to those under 18, but 1 in 5 high school students report using e-cigarettes, according to the latest survey published last year. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Hi, friends. There's a new show in town on Urban Family Talk. Nightly, 7 p.m. Central. Join me, C.L. Bryant, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Nightly, the C.L. Bryant Show over Urban Family Talk, 7 p.m.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I think everybody in my conference is in favor of the president's position on the wall and on border security. It is no secret that the use of the national emergency law has generated a good deal of discussion. It'll all come to a head on Thursday. The clock runs, and the vote will occur on Thursday.
Look, I think Nancy Pelosi is clearly already starting to lose control of her party. I think we're seeing that on a lot of the things that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. I'm glad that she sees what the rest of us see and that there's no reason, no cause for impeachment.
This is the United States of America. There's nothing we are unable to do. Nothing we've ever tried have we failed at. This is America, so it's time to get up.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, Joe Biden. Can't you just see him making that statement while he's massaging the shoulders of an uncomfortable woman or young girl who's trying desperately to get away from him? That's what should be in your mind every time you hear his voice, that he is always standing behind some woman with his hands on her shoulders and he's rubbing and massaging and whispering in her ear while she looks uncomfortable as the cameras just click and click and click. Not a man within arm's reach who would push him off or say, hey, could you get your hands off my daughter? Could you get your hands off my wife? Or, hey, honey, here, come stand over here next to me, and put their arm around their wife or their daughter. Not a man in sight. Metro men everywhere, just standing around, letting Joe Biden squeeze their wives' shoulders. Think of it. Every time you hear his voice, that should be the image in your mind. He is going to be the one that they're probably going to settle on. He's the safest crazy cat out of the crazy bag of cats they've got running on the left, and it's pretty interesting. So welcome to the show. Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And today on the show, well, first of all, Facebook and Instagram are down. Yeah, so I had a friend of mine reach out to me and say, my Instagram account just disappeared. And she just recently gotten back on Instagram. And so I'm like, wow, I wonder what's going on there. And then this morning, Facebook and Instagram are down all over the place, like literally globally all over the place. There are outages. So we're not streaming there today. We are streaming to our YouTube account and America's Voice TV. But we're not doing anything with Facebook today. Just because it's down, we can't even get to it. Today on the program, we're going to talk to John York of the Heritage Foundation. What's the topic? Well, Joe Biden. We're going to talk about Joe Biden and campaign finance and who it really benefits. And we're also going to talk about this first legally recognized non-binary American. He's actually really been out there speaking about how he has a lot of regrets and how he made a mistake and he didn't have anybody in his life who would tell him the truth and try to get him some counseling to help him get away from what was a mental illness to him. And so he's been forever altered by this experience, and he's out there trying to blow the horn, the trumpet, sound the alarm for others who your life is not just in these few moments, but the decisions that people make when they have really fools in their ears, it has lasting ramifications. So that's something that's going on as well. We're going to get into this young girl, and when you hear the audio of her voice, it's amazing. She's going to high school one day. She walks in and there's all these pictures up on the wall, rainbow flags, and she knows it's for the Gay Straight Alliance. And so, or to support, pride, so-called pride for homosexual activities. And so she prints out some Bible verses and puts them all over her locker and then puts them around near the signs where the little rainbow flags are. She's told immediately, first of all, she sees people taking the Bible verses down and leaving the flags up. And then she's informed that she has an in-school suspension the next day. And so we're going to listen to the audio of her talking about that. And we're also going to get into this story. Federal court overwhelmingly rules that Ohio can indeed defund Planned Parenthood. This is something that we're not giving up on. We can't give up on it. We have to continue to fight for pro-life causes and to keep that at the forefront. Even in spite of, there's kind of a weird new atmosphere where people are no longer willing to, go back and forth and disagree with you. They just want to shut you down and keep you from even finishing your thought or your sentence. And there's a lot of derangement. Like we call it Trump derangement syndrome, but I'm seeing it in people that aren't really political. The infection of left-wing media, it's seeping into people's brains, and the deception is no longer just you're wrong and I'm right. Let's argue about it. Now it's, visceral anger and hatred that rises up in people when they think that you are not on, quote unquote, the right side, their side, the side that believes what they believe. So it's interesting. It's really crazy to see it. So I first want to get into this audio, and then we're going to do the encouragement. I have a couple of verses for you. In light of the story with the girl for the Bible school, or not Bible school, but the suspension for posting the Bible verses, and also this non-binary American. Let's first listen to that. It's number 2, and then we'll get into the encouragement.
Yes, Laura, regret is unfortunately very common, but again, the media doesn't want to talk about these surgeries that go wrong and the host of health complications. And it's really wrong to even call this transition, because gender identity is essentially it's legal fiction. First they claimed that I was a woman, And then they claimed that I was a combination of male and female, and everybody went along with this. But as I said, it's nothing but legal fiction.
So he says he has a lot of regrets and that there's this legal fiction that people are foisting on each other. And look, can we really be surprised that he's using the word fiction? Can we really be surprised that people who believe in this type of, it's an indoctrination process, but it's also a pack of lies? Can we really be surprised that that what's happening afterwards is complete destruction of people's life? It's your whole life utterly obliterated because you've changed your body in ways that it can't be changed back. And so you have to forever live with this new reality, which is you actually now look like someone who is gender amorphous because you're no longer your original sex, the sex that you have in your DNA, your genetic basis. That's not changed, but the outer form that you have has been altered. And we're talking about the rushing of the hormones. I mean, we all, who can forget what it was like to be in high school and to start to, go through puberty and the wild emotions and the changes in your body. Well, people who go through these gender transitions, they experience that again, and they go through these wild changes in their body, and then they have to have alterations to their body made. And these aren't easy surgeries that they're having. And then when they come to their senses later and they realize, I want my original body back, there's no way to get it back. And so it's even more obvious when the Bible says that the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. We see that demonstrated here with the killing of the psyche of the individual, the destruction of their body, and the stealing of the years of their life where they were deceived into thinking that they could actually be another gender, that their gender was assigned instead of being genetically who they are. And they get to kind of look back on all of it and see how over and over again they were lied to, and how the people who lied to them, they're still living their lives in their original bodies. They've not experienced the same kind of trauma and upset that these, the people who've tried to transition have experienced. And that's the worst of it. That the people who are responsible for foisting these wrong ideas on other people, and now children, really, the children are the ones who are being targeted the most right now. Any child who doesn't like playing with Barbies and is a girl is all of a sudden she's really a boy. And then they start basically transforming the child instead of allowing them to just be a little girl who prefers to play with trucks, but still a girl, obviously. This is happening now more and more frequently, which is why it is so stunning to see a high school girl working as hard as this girl did, and we'll listen to that later in the show, basically posting Bible verses and saying people need to know the truth. They shouldn't be confused. It's just amazing. So the encouragement for today, and, some people might not find this encouraging, but I'm not here for the approval. And I don't mean that I don't care, but I mean that I'm not here for the approval, meaning if people don't like hearing scripture and the word of God, that's not my problem. Because the truth has to go out. The truth has to go out, and we have to be aware of what the truth is. So 1 Timothy 1, 8 through 11 says, "We know that the law is good if one uses it properly. We also know that the law is made not for the righteous, but for lawbreakers and rebels, the ungodly and sinful, the unholy and irreligious, for those who kill their fathers and mothers, for murderers, for the sexually immoral, for those practicing homosexuality, for slave traders, liars, perjurers, and for whatever else is contrary to the sound doctrine. That conforms to the gospel concerning the glory of the blessed God, which he entrusted to me." So first off, for those who say that homosexuality cannot possibly be a sin, practicing homosexuality comes after the writer says ungodly, sinful, unholy, irreligious, law-breaking, rebels, killers, murderers, sexually immoral. Then he says practicing homosexuality. So it's clear that this is within a group of people who are sinful and going against God's will for their bodies and for their lives towards other people. Leviticus 20, 13 through 15 says, "If a man has sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. They are to be put to death. Their blood will be on their own heads. If a man marries both a woman and her mother, it is wicked. Both he and they must be burned in the fire, so no wickedness would be among you. If a man has sexual relations with an animal, he is to be put to death. and you must kill the animal. Now, no one is advocating for killing people who practice homosexuality, but it is clear that the Bible does not tolerate it and that it is a sin. And so any condoning of that makes you guilty of the same sin. So we have to be so truly and honestly mortified by what is unholy and unclean to God that we would not want to participate in it, and we wouldn't want to be purveyors of it and spread it to other people. That's just the simple truth of it. If we're condoning it and saying, well, I don't agree with it, but it's not for me, but if other people want to do it, that's their choice, you're condoning it. You're giving it a pass. And if you're seeing, as this girl did, she felt compelled when she saw the rainbow flags elevating homosexuality and duping her classmates into thinking that it was an acceptable way to live. She was compelled to post scripture, and we are responsible for our reaction when we see this spreading about, whether it's in your kid's school, whether it's in your workplace. You have to stand up and speak out against it. I saw someone posted earlier today, there are more of us than there are of them. Why do we allow this? Such a good question. Because we're afraid of looking like those crazy Christians. And sometimes when I say that on air, even in a joking way, people automatically bristle and, they reach out to me. What do you mean, those crazy Christians? Well, when I'm being sarcastic about it, I mean, there's this caricature of us as Christians that everything that is fun, we're against it. Anything that makes people laugh or you can see people enjoying themselves, we're against it. That's not true at all. God actually says we're here to live life and live it to the fullest abundantly. He gives us that. He wants us to enjoy our food and enjoy our drink and enjoy spending time with each other and enjoy working and enjoy resting. He wants us to do those things. But there are certain activities that he has set aside as not being okay for us to do because they destroy our bodies and our minds. And all of the things that were listed in that 1 Timothy 1, 8 through 11 fall in that group. And so just like for us as parents, when we see our kids doing something that is wrong or harmful to them, we tell them to stop. And our kids say, oh, you know what, you don't like me, or you don't love me, or you don't want me to have any fun. No, that's not true. You're trying to protect your child from destroying their life or destroying their ability to do something in the future or harming themselves. So what looks like fun in the beginning ends up being something very harmful for them, and you want to stop that. And our Father in heaven is no different. In fact, he's far better than we are as parents. And so that is why it's not an act of hatred to post scriptures. It's not, to say homosexuality is wrong. It hurts you. It's not an act of hatred to tell the truth about it and to say to someone who is condoning it, but is also claiming the mantle of Christianity, that they're at odds with themselves. And it's okay to say that. And if you get pushback, if people are angry, so be it. But don't let the opportunity go by you to tell the truth. You have to do it. You have to tell the truth about this stuff. The little girl sets the example for us. When we get back, we'll have John York of the Heritage Foundation. Keep it here.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your healthcare. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Hi, I'm Crawford LaRidge with The Legacy Moment. My mother was a model of giving and sacrifice. As the saying goes, she had a heart as big as Texas. She placed others, especially the needs of her family, above her own. On more than one occasion, when we said to her, "Mom, you need to do something for yourself," she would typically say, "Y'all don't worry about me. The Lord will always make sure I get mine." That's sort of a refreshing perspective. We live in a culture full of demands. Everybody wants to make sure that they get what belongs to them. I want mine. I've got to take care of me first and make sure I don't go without. So we're grabbing and hoarding and making sure we look good. As followers of Christ, giving and an others orientation is part of who we are. God always makes sure that those who give get what they need. That's why I love the model of selfless leadership in Joshua. Listen to Joshua chapter 19, verses 49 and 50. When they finished apportioning the land for inheritance by its borders, the sons of Israel gave an inheritance in their midst to Joshua the son of Nun. In accordance with the command of the Lord, they gave him the city for which he asked, Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim. So he built the city and settled in it. There are two wonderful perspectives we need to hold on to from these two verses. First, meet the needs of those around you. Don't be so focused on what you need. Worry about others' needs first. Then second, your needs will not go unnoticed or unmet. God will make sure you get what you need. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. God's heart is drawn toward givers. Put others first. As my mother would have said, God will make sure you get yours.
Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz is produced by Moody Radio.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you for being with us today here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Why don't you go over to StacyOnTheRight.com and hit the subscribe button? You'll get the periodically issued newsletter that I do, which always has pictures from the White House, or sometimes it's interviews that we've done here on the show. We sometimes put them into separate YouTube videos so you can have it. It's like a little mini podcast of just that interview and you can share it. Really great content. Actually, we're thinking about doing one for Counterculture Mom. She was extremely popular yesterday. I've gotten so much feedback from that interview. Fantastic. We had Tina Griffin on with us. So go to StacyOnTheRight.com and hit the subscribe button. You will not regret it. And right now it's my pleasure to welcome John York of the Heritage Foundation. John, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Stacy. It is great to be on. In fact, you interviewed my boss a few days ago, John Malcolm. So I hope I can do as well as he did. And if I don't tell him about it. That would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, first of all, we like him. He's awesome. Yeah, he's great. It must be super fun to work with someone who's that lightning fast and knowledgeable. And all of you guys are super. Let me just for a second before we get into this interview. Let me tell you something. Okay? So let me tell you, John York, I'm going to tell you a couple things people don't really know. And that is, a few years back, I was hanging out with Jay Carafano over at the Heritage Foundation. And he took me up to the Margaret Thatcher statue that y'all have up there. And I took my picture next to it, and I was hanging out. And deep down within myself, I thought, if I ever lived in the D.C. area, I would come to the Heritage Foundation, and I would stage a little mini protest until y'all hired me so I could be there every day. Because I love it over there.
Job, funnily enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you get a job at the Heritage Foundation? Other than being super awesome and having like 1,000 degrees and being a lawyer and a doctor and an engineer all at once, you guys have some amazing staff over there. The building is beautiful. It's centrally located. And it's one of my favorite places. Whenever I'm in D.C., I always find a reason to get up there and hang out with y'all and use your Wi-Fi. So just telling you. They don't let me wander around the building, but I do usually get up to where the Daily Signal is, and I just occupy an empty cubicle. And people are like, "Who is this? What is she doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm borrowing y'all's studio." And I just get looks like, "Who let her in here?" So you guys have a pretty cool thing. So, okay, let's talk about Joe Biden now. I'm so sick of him, to be honest. I'm so sick of him. Now that he's finally said he's going to run, I know he's probably going to be the one to get the nomination, but they're going to fight like cats and dogs because he's not progressive enough. But I don't think I don't think the progressives have enough to
question mark. That's a major question mark.
Well, yeah. I think the new wing is still too new to actually not get him, like to get Bernie, but I think it's going to be Joe Biden.
Well, I think that, like, you pointed out the problem. Is this new wing of the Progressive Party strong enough and sure enough of itself? Because it's not. I don't think anyone on the left thinks it's a sure thing that they're going to win in 2020. And so are people going to vote their heart? Are they going to vote for the person they really love? Or are they going to vote for the person they think has a clear shot to win? And if they vote for the person they think has a clear shot to win, gosh, it'd be hard-pressed to say it's not Biden, right? I mean, from my perspective.
Yeah. I think because he's the least crazy of them all, but he has a problem with keeping his hands off women's shoulders and their backs and, rubbing them. And even young women and 12-year-old girls, he just likes giving everybody a shoulder massage. And I had somebody
It's a bit
on.
of an odd thing, I'll admit that.
Well, it looks horrible in pictures. It's really enraging, actually, because if you have teenage daughters, like me and my husband have teenage daughters, you know that they're already so uncomfortable. Like they're barely wanting to hug their own mom. And then there's this guy, Joe Biden, he's got his shoulders hunched up around his ears and he's rubbing their shoulders. And you're like, what are you doing, dude? What is this?
It's the optics aren't great. I'll admit that. And more than that, even I think some of the things he said, and he's been in politics a long time, and the party has changed so dramatically since when he got in the 70s. And some of the comments he made back then are so out of line with what Democrats are saying today, especially around race relations. And it's hard to, as I'm sure you know.
I just like laughing about it because he was so real. And so none of it's offensive to me because you know what? I like knowing what people think. I'm like, you know what? That's what you think. Fine. That's what you thought in the 70s. Fine. Who cares? Like, I'm not offended by it, but I'm also not a Democrat. So this would not be a problem for me. And I don't think older Democrats would have a problem with it either. But the new ones are going to see these stories and they're going to be like, we can't vote for him.
Yeah, I think that's right. So you and I probably aren't going to be voting Democratic primary unless we just want to throw a wrench in things. We happen to live in an open primary state, which would probably, you'd want to think about whether or not that's what the founders would have intended. But I think with Biden, it seems to me all the Democrats I know, whenever I see people talking on MSNBC and CNN, they just want fresh blood. And so I think that's going to be a real hurdle for sure.
Yeah, because Joe Biden is a lot of things, but he's not fresh blood. We can agree on that.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's an old guy, and I got nothing against old guys. I like Donald Trump. I like the fact that he's older and he has all of that experience, and that we have all these YouTube videos of him from decades ago saying similar things to what he says now. I like that, but I just don't see the Democrats because what they're doing right now is they're vilifying anyone who's white or a man or has any age on them. Like that is their favorite target du jour. So how did they then nominate Joe Biden, who is an older white man, who, according to them, is the devil, the privileged monster, someone who would never help anyone else, selfish, racist, etc.?
Yeah, their own standard is sort of discounting, or may lead them to discount certainly their most popular person in the states, real swing states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan. It's easy to see Biden doing better in those states than Hillary Clinton, and certainly better than the other people in the field this time around. So it may their own very rigorous, probably unfair standard that you mentioned. That's probably could be the hill they die on.
I hope so, because I really don't want. So the thing with Joe Biden is, and I've said this many times on the radio, John. He's a Democrat. He has views that I disagree with, but he's also super fun. And the best things he's ever done, like marketing wise, are the videos he did with Barack Obama, where he's the sidekick, and Barack Obama's the cool kid. And as much as I hate their policies, I watch those videos and I laugh. They make me laugh. I think they both look so. They're like the bro relationship that all bro relationships want to be. Like, so that's bad for Republicans who are always seen as unfunny, and the way they've demonized President Trump, who actually is really fun.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's strange in a way that people don't. Well, I don't know. I understand that if I was on the left and he came as hard after figures I liked as Trump does on Twitter, I'd probably be a little mad too, but it is hard to deny. A lot of what he says is objectively funny. So
It is.
yeah, I agree with you.
Well, he makes he makes you laugh. You're like, what did he just say? Because he's the old school troll that we all want to be. Sometimes I'll read President Trump's tweets and I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that, years ago when I used to tweet a lot, I would tweet something similar to this and get, 40,000 retweets. Like my best tweets were when I would get frustrated about something and tweet out just whatever I thought. And that resonated with people. And that is what President Trump is like all the time. So it's no wonder that people really, if you're the recipient of that ire, it burns. But if you're on the other side just watching, you're like, more of this. I need more of him tweeting the truth and the way we really feel. Okay, so let's talk about this campaign finance thing. Why do you say that he's showing us that the campaign finance reform would benefit the media and not the people?
So if you think so, this is an article I wrote a while back, but it's still very true today. Joe Biden was on Sunday Night Football. I think it was during an intermission. It might have been during halftime. I don't recall. It was 2017. He got 2 minutes on the air with Matt Lauer to promote his book. His book, Promise Me Dad, about his relationship with his son, was about to come out. And it was the most, if you could script a perfect campaign ad, that's what it was. Of course, he hadn't announced his candidacy then. He hasn't announced it now. I think then, as now, we could probably guess Joe Biden was going to run. And the visuals were so perfect. He was in this sports bar with Matt Lauer, the crowd behind him. At one point he asked, I don't know, folks, what do you think? Should I run? A big whoop of applause from the crowd. And it struck me that if you bought 2 minutes of airtime during a halftime of Sunday Night Football, it would cost you, what was that calculated, $2.8 million. You got it for free.
Wow.
So Democrats focus so much on campaign finance reform and all the political ads and all the spending by wealthy people. But if you just strip that out, we wouldn't have an equal voice. All Americans wouldn't have an equal voice. The media would have even more of a monopoly than they do. And as you probably know, your show and Rush Limbaugh and Fox News are the exception. Almost all the major figures in mass media are very, very to the left. So you can see who that would favor.
I mean, yeah, and so you just listed me off with some like power hitters there. So a couple of those programs you named off are reaching, we're talking 32 million a week. So that's a place where you want him to mention your book if you write one. You want him to drop your name. We reach millions of people here on American Family Radio, and we have a huge audience, and I'm grateful that we're growing. We have all of that going on. But we're talking about blanket media saturation on the left, where they have an echo chamber in which they just basically reset the loop with the newest, latest talking points. And that goes out, and they literally repeat it word for word to make sure that every American who's just catching a snippet at the airport or just catching a snippet on their way in or out of picking up a kid, that they all get the same 10 talking points. And that's every day, 24 hours a day, even on the weekend. And the reason I know this is because I've never met a liberal who didn't know the talking points. I've never met a person on the left who claims to know anything about the elections or anything. If they say they're voting, when you talk to them, they parrot the leftist talking points word for word. But if you ask them anything more, any follow-on questions are met with blank stares, because all they've got is just the surface. They've got the whatever that they were told from CNN or MSNBC. So when you talk about Joe Biden being on football, I almost feel like, John, if let's say Donald Trump had something amazing that he'd written about one of his kids, and it was just relatable and relational, and he was, in a good mood and not talking politics. And he said, you know what, let's get 2 minutes on, ESPN. I could imagine they almost would say, no, we're not going to sell you that time. Like, that's how polarized we are right now, where they're even protecting their time from us buying it.
Oh, most definitely. And if you look, there's been studies of this. Something like 90% of news coverage of Trump is negative on the major networks. I'm surprised it's not 100%. I don't think I've ever seen any favorable coverage of Trump. I mean, maybe around North Korea. That's maybe an overstatement. 90% is probably about right.
Yeah.
But for Democrats, obviously, as you know, the story is much different. And I think even though the mass media, the cable outlets, CNN, MSNBC, the over-the-air, the Big Four, they don't have a monopoly as they did before cable. but they sure set the tone. I mean, if they break a scandal, Fox News has to respond. But CNN, MSNBC, NBC doesn't have to respond to Fox News on anything. I mean, as we know throughout the Obama administration, they can ignore Fast and Furious. They can ignore many of the stories that were broken on conservative media. So they can call the shots and determine what the issues in the campaign are going to be. And one of the only cross-messaging platforms we have is, unfortunately, campaign ads, which you have to pay for.
Which can actually, it's like feast or famine with those ads. What I've noticed is that for some people, they have the right combination, this mixture. It's like a really complex recipe that you have to have. Specifically, you have to have the right person, the right message, the right delivery, and then the ads have to be like, so many of them. They can't just be one or two. You have to have a ton of them to catch all of the people, because in today's world, like we were talking about on TV, there's this thing running on television and half the people in the room had seen it and the other half had no idea what was going on because they just stopped watching regular television. So you're still not going to catch everyone. And that makes it all the more precarious for a candidate to say, I'm just like, Hillary Clinton ran a lot of TV ads. It didn't do her any good. Donald Trump didn't have to run any because everybody in the media was like, let's get him on. We want him for the candidate because we know he'll lose. And it backfired on them because they really brought him on and he explained his ideas and he made himself sound relatable and normal. And a lot of independents were like, you know what? He has a successful business. Let's give him a try. So my concern is that, like with this HR 1 legislation, is that the one that they want to do the campaign finance? All that stuff.
The For the People Act, which you could easily say is the For the Democrats Act.
Right.
More fair.
Right. For the Democrats to win elections in perpetuity Act. It's not
No doubt.
We can't have that.
That's the long title.
Right. Well, so how do we stop them? Because what I know it's a long shot for to unseat a sitting president when there's not, an economic downturn or something like that. It's really, they have an uphill climb to beat Trump in 2020. But let's say they did, God forbid, they would enact things like HR 1 and get their president to sign it into law. What would we be able to do about that as Americans?
Well, if they were able to enact HR 1, well, they would have to win the Senate as well. But let's imagine they had a really great year in 2020 and did win both the presidency and the Senate. We'd be radically constrained in how we could give our money or get our money into politics to kind of counter the narrative of the left, or even give money directly to candidates. That'd be very difficult. And not only that, the Democrats would have advantages not only in campaign finance reform or keeping money, or rather tamping down campaign finance reform. There's all sorts of little Easter eggs in HR 1. Like, for instance, right now the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, that goes after people who engage in campaign finance fraud or elections fraud.
Okay, wait.
Right now,
I need to interrupt you and let you just hold that thought, put a pin in it. Can you hang on until after the break and finish that up?
Sure.
Okay, perfect.
Yep,
We've got John York of the Heritage Foundation, and he'll be with us right after these messages. Stay right there for more Stacy on the Right.
What does it take to be a sports success and a team player? Here's Pro Football Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy with today's Uncommon Moment.
Hall of Famer David Deacon Jones was one of the best pass rushers ever to play the game. In the 1960s, tackling the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage didn't have a name, so Jones coined the term sack, and boy did he get a lot of sacks. He would have recorded 170, but the league did not keep track of sacks until 1983. His signature move was smacking the helmet of the offensive lineman. His long arms and quick hands allowed him to smack opponents' helmets, causing them to blink. That single blink gave him the opening he needed to get into the backfield. Jones was an uncommon player who used every single moment, even a blink, to his advantage.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of Quiet Strength and the Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
J. Warner Wallace.
I think we're blessed as Christians that we don't believe something that's not rooted in history. We believe something that had to actually occur. As Paul said, if the resurrection didn't actually occur in history, we're to be pitied. And that's the beautiful thing about Christianity, is it's something you can actually investigate. I'm grateful for that, because as an investigator, that's exactly how I came to faith.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Listen, do you really know who Jesus is? And let me help you to know who he is. When you think about all of these kind of false Jesuses that are floating around social media, you know the Jesus. You know, you got the ethnocentric Jesus, you got the political Jesus, left-wing Jesus, you know, all these popular Jesuses. But the question I think all of us need to ask is, will the real Jesus stand up? Please stand up. Please stand up.
Tuned in to Equipped, weekday afternoons at 12 Central on Urban Family Talk.
I'm Hank Weinblum with your word of the week.
Anti-Semitic, anti-Israel bigotry.
Anti-Semitism, hostility to Jews, goes back thousands of years, but the word didn't go into wide use until the 19th century. Its origin is German. Anti-Semitic atrocities, culminating in the Holocaust, led to creation of the State of Israel. But a comment that support for Israel is like
allegiance to a foreign country.
And it's all about the Benjamins led many Democrats and Republicans to speak out.
Anti-Semitic language, that Jews control the world, that Jews care only about money.
They say bad-mouthing the Israeli government and a pro-Israel lobby is code for bad-mouthing Jews.
The Democrats have become an anti-Israel party. They've become an anti-Jewish party.
But others, including some presidential candidates, say throwing around a charge of anti-Semitism when it may not actually be there weakens the time when it really is. With your word of the week, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. We are chatting with John York of the Heritage Foundation. And John, you were going into some discussion about the campaign finance topic that we were just covering here, and I wanted to give you a chance to finish that up.
Well, there's just many, many things in H.R. 1 that would tip the scales permanently in favor of Democrats, not just on the campaign finance reform dimension, but also, quote-unquote, voting rights, which is to say making sure voters can actually legally vote before they vote. Democrats, of course, are making a big push against that. So elections have consequences, and if 2020 turns in the Democrats' favor, I think they're going to do everything they can to tip the scales in their favor on an ongoing basis and make sure something like 2016 never happens again.
I want to make sure that it does have the possibility of happening, because I understand the desire to win, but what I'm seeing is a persistent effort by the Democrats. Anytime they see a way that Republicans have been able to lawfully exert local control, exert control over something, or reverse something, or enact a law that they like, they look for a way to prevent that from ever happening again, as if they could somehow enforce mob rule by the Democrats and subvert the will of really half of the country for forever. That's what they're doing with illegal immigration. They're doing it with this H.R. 1. They're doing it with their desire to have, they've already packed all the courts with liberals, and now President Trump is changing that through filling the vacancies with constitutional people. Everywhere you look, they're trying to find a way to subvert actual just voters making a decision one way or the other.
Right. Yeah, you brought up immigration. The Democrats often say voters should choose their politicians. Politicians shouldn't choose their voters. And they say that whenever the issue of drawing district lines comes up or voter ID laws come up. But really, what is the immigration issue other than Democrats trying to choose their voters by reconstituting the nation and bringing in people they know are going to tend to vote for them? I mean, it's no mystery. So, in a way, they're the party that's trying to choose their voters. I hate to say it, but it's true.
Totally true. Well, I'm excited that, first of all, I got to speak to John Malcolm and now John York. I'm on my way. I'm going to put a check mark beside everyone. I've interviewed Jay Carafano and Hans Wiskowski and so many others from the Heritage Foundation. Yeah, all the greats. And I will keep going down the list until I've interviewed every single one of you. So just get yourselves ready. I'm every one of you off the list.
We'll do. The next time you come by, don't be a stranger.
Hey, I will stop by. I'm telling you, it's one of my favorite things to do. In fact, it's so regular for me to go there that my mom will say, what time do you land? And are we taking you to the Heritage Foundation? She just picks me up from the airport. This time I was like, no, take me straight to the Gaylord because I'm going to CPAC this time. She was like, oh, CPAC. Okay. And they pick me up and take me straight over wherever I'm going. And then we talk and, sometimes we have lunch first, but they always end up taking me to the Heritage Foundation. And she knows that she'll say, oh, you're not going to the Heritage Foundation this time. Because I was just in DC for CPAC. And I said, nope, I'm not going to get a chance to go this time. She was like, like, that's odd.
That's terrific.
All
well,
right.
Like I said, you're always welcome. Stop by anytime. I'm always here at my desk.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, John
right.
York of the
Take
Heritage
care.
Foundation. Talk to you again soon. So I want to get to this audio of this girl who was given an in-school suspension for posting Bible verses. And I want you to listen to her. She's so young, but she's so brave. And she's an example for those of us who, I know you get tired of politics. I know you get tired of, being adversarial, but this isn't really about being adversarial. When you listen to her, you'll hear she's not actually being adversarial. She's coming from a perspective of wanting to spread the truth. And I know for me, that's an attitude that's better than saying, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to get in your face. In order to truly win, we've got to start telling people the truth and letting that soak in. Let the Holy Spirit do his work. We have to be the ones telling the truth and then, let it go from there. So listen to her. It's number 5.
So on Thursday when I got to school, I seen that there were pride flags posters around my school. And I felt the need to write down some Bible verses so I could put them around my school. And I wrote them down and I put them around my lockers, the walls, and I was coming back from lunch because I got sent back to lunch, and I seen the teachers taking them down. And the next day I got called to the office, and there is a letter that says that I have an ISS, which is an in-school suspension. And the reason why I have it is because abuse of others, disrespect, rudeness, because I put Bible verses up targeting the GSA organization. I did not know what the GSA organization was or meant. I seen that there was people in my school that needed help, and they don't need to be living in the confusion of wondering if they should be gay, bi, lesbian, trans, anything like that. And I know that God is the only way that they can be healed by that, and that's why I did it. I was not targeting any kind of organization or anything like that.
So she goes on to talk about how when she was called in for the in-school suspension, she asked the principal, the principal said, why were you targeting them? She said, it's not targeting, I'm just telling the truth. And she said, I just posted Bible verses. And he said, who gave you permission to do that? And she said, well, who gave them permission to put up their posters, like their little flags? And he said, you need permission to put it up. And she said, why do I need permission to share? People post Post-it notes with things that they want on people's lockers. They post them on the wall. They tape stuff to the walls all the time. Why is it only Scripture that is required to have permission to put up? And so again, first of all, I am aware that there are people who listen to this program who are also Republicans and they're on the right politically, who are gay, homosexual, lesbian, whatever, and that they disagree with what I said in the first segment. But your argument is not with me. And so the reason why I'm making that delineation is because I didn't write the Bible. I didn't create those scriptures. I am not the source material for what I shared in the first segment during the encouragement. That source material, again, if you missed it, is 1 Timothy 1, 8 through 11, and Leviticus 20, 13 through 15. There are other scriptures in the Bible which speak to homosexuality. Those aren't the only two, but those are the two that I chose to use for the discussion in the first segment. If you disagree with what I said, that is your right, but you are not disagreeing with me personally. You're disagreeing with my viewpoint, but my viewpoint comes from what I've read in the Bible. And so the bone that you have to pick ultimately is with God's word and what he says about what you are choosing to do. And so I'm not saying that out of anger or hatred or a desire to make anyone feel bad. This isn't me picking a fight with any segment of the audience. It's just the truth. And I've been there before where I'm doing something or believing something that is not biblical. And when confronted with that, the first reaction is, well, you don't like, or you hate, or you blah, blah, blah. But this is not about me. I don't intend on engaging any online fights about it or going back and forth over it. I gave you the scriptures. You have to make up your own mind what you're going to believe, but you can't change what God's word says. And I'm not the one who wrote it. So I want to give you a couple more details on this story about the Ohio school student. She actually, her name is Gabby Helsinger, and she put the Facebook video up, and it's just gone viral. The Lebanon City School Superintendent told FaithWire that it's not against school official policy to share or display religious expression on school grounds. And the school's principal, who spoke with her, Scott Butler, he declined to comment to Fox News about this. Now, I went on earlier and tried to see the original place where I found the video, and the video was unavailable. So I had to search all over the place, like just before the show, to try to find where the video was still available, and I found it at thehill.com. They claim that they're not going to discuss it because it involves a school disciplinary incident, but isn't that convenient? If they had just talked to her about it and it wasn't discipline, then they would have an opportunity to discuss what they're doing with the media. But they can shield themselves from having to really explain why she has to have permission and have an in-school suspension, where other people can post stuff up and they don't have the same parameters. Has something to do with Christianity, don't you think? So you've got Lebanon High School. It's about 30 miles northeast of Cincinnati, Ohio. And she wrote these Bible verses down, puts them around the lockers and on the walls, and then teachers came and took them down. How's that for censorship? How's that for making sure that only one viewpoint can be put out there and accepted? How's that for a lesson taught to the other students? Put Bible verses up, we'll suspend you. We'll take the verses down and we'll suspend you. It's not right. It's not right. So this story is also out of Ohio, and I want to get to it. We have a few minutes left in this segment. If you want to call in, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. This story is also out of Ohio. A federal court overwhelmingly ruled that Ohio can indeed defund Planned Parenthood. It's the Sixth Circuit that ruled that the state of Ohio can block public funds from going to Planned Parenthood because they perform abortions. And the ruling was 11-6. The AP is reporting that a divided federal appeals court on Tuesday upheld an Ohio anti-abortion law that blocks public money for Planned Parenthood. Now, I have previous to this, as an aside, said that I really hate it when they say we're anti-abortion instead of saying people who believe in life, from conception to natural death are pro-life. But I'm amending that, because if you're anti-abortion and abortion is just a euphemism for barbarically killing an unborn baby, so be it. Anti-abortion it is. You can call it anti-abortion. You can call the people pro-life. In any case, it's the protection of unborn babies. So however you're terming it, so be it. Let's do that dance. If this is all about language, we should find another word for abortion, because it's just a word they made up to make it easier to talk about their march towards infanticide. And that is the issue here. We're actually quibbling over whether or not the Democrats are openly calling for infanticide because babies born after botched abortions are left to die, and they want to make that law, and they have in New York. But we're quibbling over which side of the womb the killing should take place. It should take place on neither side of the womb. Somehow I feel like in some ways we've fallen down on the argument, and we're winning on the merits. We have more pro-life people in America than ever before, and the millennials are the most pro-life generation. But I've said what I have to say. So the full U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, reversed the lower federal court ruling. And, it's pretty awesome. Jeffrey Sutton, who's a judge on the court, wrote the opinion for an 11-6 majority, saying saying that judges rejected the contention by 2 Planned Parenthood affiliates that the Ohio law imposes an unconstitutional condition on public funding. And the affiliates are correct that the Ohio law imposes a condition, but that condition does not violate the Constitution because the affiliates do not have a due process right to perform abortions. So that's pretty stunning. So let's go to Casey in Arkansas. Hey, Casey. Thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, Stacy.
Hey.
Hey, I just wanted to call and comment on a couple, 3 little things real quick.
Sure.
I want to say that a girl, to Gabby, keep up the good work and don't back down.
Amen.
We are behind you, and you have no idea how many people are behind you.
That's the
and
truth.
I also wanted to say there was a discussion the other day about the Veterans Administration taking the Bibles out of the sanctuaries.
Yeah.
When you take a room with chairs and pews in it, and you take religious material out of it, Bibles and crosses out of it, it's just an empty room.
Yeah, it's not a sanctuary anymore.
Rooms anywhere in the building.
It's true. It's true. I just don't understand why they think we should be okay with that. Like, I'm exhausted by the constant idiocy of these arguments. Like, just leave the Bibles there, and anybody who wants to come in and use the space, just come in and use it and stop making it like so hard. Let's go to Mary in Iowa. Hey, Mary.
Hello. Hey.
Hey.
Yeah, I was listening to you, and I just, hey, and I was just saying to your person there that, it's just like you wonder what can we do because it's gone so far because people on the right, I just think that, we've let the left rule for so long and let them push and push and push us further and further away from what's right and what's good and what God intended that now I wonder if it's too late. I mean, all I know to do when I hear these things is just to speak God's truth.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I don't know what else we can do as people because it's so out of control that we, it's like every time somebody tries to quote scripture like this girl or do anything, and she asked the right questions, why is it that Christians are the only ones that are penalized or
it's true.
Persecuted for
It's true.
For
and
I think,
Mary, we're running out of time, but thank you for the comment, and you're so right. What we can do is we can speak the truth and we can pray. Hold on the line. We'll still take your call after the break at the top of the hour. If we're saying goodbye to you right now, God bless from the heartland, and thank you for making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
AFA Action Alerts. When you subscribe, we'll notify you once or twice a week about a critical issue facing our country. AFA Action Alerts have been very successful in influencing legislation, as well as getting positive results from America's Fortune 500 companies. Subscribe to your AFA Action Alerts today. Go to afa.net and click on the Resources tab.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump has grounded all of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 and MAX 9 planes being used by U.S. carriers. This after crashes in the last 6 months, including one on Sunday with Ethiopian Airlines that killed 157 people. The president made the announcement from the White House.
You'll be hearing from the FAA directly in a little while. I would say probably in 45 minutes from now, so you'll be prepared to hear. They're going to go into great detail as to what they found and where we're going, what we're doing. But all of those planes are grounded, effective immediately.
Canada has taken similar steps. For the first time in his administration, President Trump has flipped an appeals court to have a majority of Republican-appointed judges. The court in question is the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, and the turnaround comes after the Senate confirmed Paul Mady's nomination in a 54-45 vote. Speaking about this on AFR's Today's Issues program, AFA legal analyst Abraham Hamilton III said one of President Trump's legacies will be the imprint he makes on the federal judiciary.
He came into office with an historic number of vacancies. Considering the sheer volume of nominees, if all of his current nominees are confirmed, President Trump will have effectively nominated nearly 54% of the entire Article III judiciary. That is huge, and I've said repeatedly, the Supreme Court gets all of the attention, generally speaking, but they only hear, last year the Supreme Court heard 69 cases. The appellate courts hear 30 to 40,000 cases every year, and they also serve as the foundation for many of the ultimate Supreme Court nominees, as we saw with Justice Neil Gorsuch and with Brett Kavanaugh here recently.
Speaking of Brett Kavanaugh, the Senate has confirmed his replacement at the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. 45-year-old Naomi Rao comes to the court after working for the Trump and George W. Bush administrations. Not every environmentalist is on board with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal. Steve Jordahl reports.
It's estimated to cost somewhere around $93 trillion over 10 years. The early plan is to get rid of air travel, retrofit every building in America with solar panels, and pay everyone who can't or doesn't want to work a living wage. How to pay for it all? New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says not to bother her with such trivial concerns.
Oh, it's vague. Oh, it doesn't address this little minute thing. And I'm like, you try. You do it. Right. Because you're not. So until you do it, I'm the boss.
But the boss is dead wrong, according to Patrick Moore. He should know. He's the founder of the environmental group Greenpeace. He spoke to Fox News.
Of course climate change is real. It's been happening since the beginning of time. But it's not dangerous, and it's not made by people.
Not a take that's going to win him friends on the left, for sure, but it's what many actual climate scientists have been saying all along.
The whole climate crisis, as they call it, is not only fake news, it's fake science. There is no climate crisis. In fact, carbon dioxide is the main building block of all life. That's where the carbon comes from in carbon-based life.
As for the 29-year-old AOC and her Green New Deal,
it's a silly plan. That's why I suggested she was a pompous little twit. Twit meaning silly in the British lexicon and pompous meaning arrogant.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Fiat Chrysler is recalling about 900,000 vehicles that the company says do not meet U.S. emission standards. Jeff Manasso has more.
Fiat Chrysler is recalling almost 863,000 cars, crossovers, and SUVs, including the 2011 to 2014 Chrysler 200 and Dodge Avenger, 2011 and 2012 Dodge Calibers, and 2011 to 2016 Dodge Journeys. That Reuters reports don't meet U.S. emissions standards. The recall reportedly prompted by testing by the Environmental Protection Agency and by FCA, which agreed earlier this year to pay $800 million to settle with the federal government for diesel-powered trucks and SUVs that didn't meet emission standards. In Chicago, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I think everybody in my conference is in favor of the president's position on the wall and on border security. It is no secret that the use of the national emergency law has generated a good deal of discussion. It'll all come to a head on Thursday. The clock runs, and the vote will occur on Thursday.
Look, I think Nancy Pelosi is clearly already starting to lose control of her party. I think we're seeing that on a lot of the things that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. I'm glad that she sees what the rest of us see and that there's no reason, no cause for impeachment.
This is the United States of America. There's nothing we are unable to do. Nothing we've ever tried had we failed at. This is America, so it's time to get up
And now, Stacy Washington.
It's America, so it's time to get up. That's Joe Biden for you. Oh, you gotta love old crazy Uncle Joe. I'm just still. We have to be praying, especially when you sit down to your meals. Is praying for the truth to ring out, for the scales to be removed from our Christian brothers and sisters' eyes on these issues that are so foundational to the faith, and that people would be on fire for Jesus Christ. That's what we have to be praying for, because that's the answer here. Of course, this show is about politics and culture and the Christian worldview, but in the end, the ultimate healer, the one who helps us to be able to understand things, when he gives us understanding and he gives us wisdom and the ability to interpret and correctly see the truth, to decipher truth from lies, that comes from God. That kind of brain power, knowledge, know-how, everything, that comes from God. We got to keep things in perspective. So, yeah, we have now hour 2 of the show. We're going to be chatting with our good friend Gabriella Hoffman. She'll be joining us to talk about some conservation efforts and things. She's been really breaking out in that area. Her career is taking off with freelance consulting and doing speaking engagements, and especially talking about conservation. And from the pro-Second Amendment perspective and from the perspective of a hunter. She's a hunter and a fisher, and really she does just some amazing work. And so we're going to be so glad to chat with her. Right now, I want to pivot over, and if you wanted to call into the show and you weren't able to get through last hour, you're welcome to do it right now at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So let's now get into, we frequently have Mark Lauder on the program from the RNC. He used to be the press secretary for Vice President Mike Pence, and he's a fan favorite here on the show. And he was talking about the state of the Russia collusion investigation, and he had this to say. I thought it was fascinating. It's number 4.
What took her so long? It's been 2 years, 300,000 documents, hundreds of hours of interviews, and she's come to the same conclusion that President Trump said day one: no collusion. So I'm surprised that it took her that long to get there.
So Nancy Pelosi said yesterday, and we listened to the audio yesterday on the show, of her saying that she's never been for impeachment. She didn't want to impeach George Bush, which, isn't it telling? Just for 1 second, if we sit and we just say, let's just sit here for a second and understand. Back when George Bush was president, and he clearly didn't do anything to be impeached for, Democrats wanted to impeach him. Ever since the Republicans impeached Bill Clinton, the Democrats have been on a tear. They want to impeach a Republican president. And they don't care if you're guilty of anything or not. They're just like, we got to impeach somebody. Let's get it on. What's funny about what Mark Lauder just said there, 2 years and 300,000 documents, multiple tens of millions of American taxpayer dollars, and an utter waste of our time and energy. And we still don't have any proof that President Trump is an agent of the Russians. Now, go out on the street, stop at the grocery store, ask somebody, do you think President Trump is working like he's a puppet of the Russians, like Putin is his puppet master? Some people will say, yeah. Oh, he's guilty. He's a treasonous, traitor to our country. If you ask them for proof, they'll say, well, they just keep saying that. It's the truth. I know it's true. They're going to find something. Don't leave it to now that the Democrats control the House, they'll find something. Really? So you're not willing to consider the fact that maybe it's just not true? We know he's guilty. Well, if you listen to something over and over and over again, you're going to become convinced that it's the truth, whether it's the truth or not. If you're into that, if you're into being deceived. And that is what we're seeing. So 2 years, 300,000 documents. Pelosi has now thrown in the towel, but her conference has not. Others are pushing forward with impeachment. They don't care that their head boss honcho, the red coat wearer extraordinaire, Mrs. I throw on my shades when I leave the White House and make viral memes. She may be viral and she may be scary to some folk, but the hardcore leftists who are now working on taking over the Democrats, they don't want any part of it. They're going to stick with the impeachment meme, even if it costs them 2020. So Press Secretary Sanders said that 2020 is an uphill battle for the Democrats and that they're really going to have a tough time making it there. This is number 3.
We're focused on doing what the American people actually care about, whether it's growing the economy, creating jobs like the more than 5 million jobs the president has created since being elected to office, defeating ISIS, rebuilding the military. These are things that people are sitting around in America that they actually care about. Nobody wants to see President Trump impeached because other than Democrats in Congress who are failing, who have no other message, and that's because our country is doing better, and they know that that is hard for them to run against in 2020, and I think they've got a very, very hard uphill battle ahead of them.
So, not that the economy is the most important thing, but it is hard to argue with people who have jobs, who are making money, who are experiencing an increase in their pay, who have benefited from the tax cut, people who are seeing opportunity. It's hard to convince them that a change in leadership is in order when they're experiencing that. And that's the point here. It's not that everything that the president has promised is getting done. We know that's not the case. The obstructionists have really been effective in preventing him from implementing his agenda on immigration. But there are still things to be very, very happy about. And, so I think people are going to go with that. And it's also tough. It's tough when you're not having the kind of results that you've been told are going to happen. Like the Democrats have said, there's going to be a recession, there's going to be an economic downturn, there's going to be, people hauled away in cattle cars, people who are gay are going to get deported. I mean, that just nonsensical stuff, because you can't get deported if you're an American citizen, unless you're an American citizen through immigration and you commit a crime and you're convicted and you serve your time, then you can be deported. But just being deported because of a lifestyle choice, that's not a thing. So we've seen a lot of just garbage, and hopefully that will no longer be the case, but I'm not so sure. I think the Democrats are going to go with what's been working, and the indoctrination, unfortunately, has been working pretty well. So there's all of that. Now, I know there was the story about the planes that have been grounded, and I'm only just going to address this. Obviously, there are a lot of these planes in operation, the MAX 8 and MAX 9, but they've also had this major crash for the Ethiopian Airlines jetliner, 150 some odd people killed, 20 of them were Americans, and it's not the first crash. There have been a few crashes over the past 6-month period. And so what they're doing is they're grounding the plane so that they can figure out what's going on. I also saw a story about how apparently there's been some kind of safety issue reported, and it didn't really go anywhere. And so if that's found to be the case, you have to wonder what are they going to do? What are the ramifications going to be? Is anybody going to get in trouble or heads going to roll? Certainly, you have to wonder what's going to happen. President Trump has actually grounded the Boeing 737 MAX planes effective immediately. We were the only country in the world still flying them after the Ethiopia disaster. And the planes are made by Boeing. And it's the 737 MAX 8 and 9 planes. Any plane that is currently in the air will be allowed to land, but then the planes will be grounded until further notice. And it was kind of a surprise announcement that he made today. We were listening to some audio of that at the top of the hour, I believe it was, over the news break. President Trump made the decision following conversations with Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg, and the acting FAA administrator. Now, there was new information and physical evidence which emerged on tragic incidents involving the planes, and he says they're all in agreement on the action. It was 157 people who were killed on the Ethiopian Airlines flight, and a Lion Air flight on a 737 MAX 8 crashed in October in Indonesia, killing 189 passengers and crew. And American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, United Airlines, all of those airlines had not grounded the Boeing 737 MAX planes prior to the president's announcement. 40 countries have banned the aircraft from flying for now. So we will see what happens with that. As things develop, we'll definitely bring you more news on that. And, as if we're going to have the grounding of these planes, hopefully they'll figure out what's wrong and then bring the planes back into operation after they've, taken care of whatever it is that was bringing on these crashes. Now, I want to talk about the Covington kids for a minute. The Covington kids were the ones who were on a field trip and they had on MAGA hats and they're minding their own business, and some Indian tribe guy came over and harassed them, and some Democrat took a video of the entire encounter and kind of posted it to make it seem as if the Covington kids were the aggressors. Now, one of the things that is so horrible about this entire story is that these kids were smeared and treated like the worst kinds of human beings by everyone. So then the truth came out with the extended video clip, and then people were, upset. They were like, "Oh, we've maligned these kids," and now the kids' parents are suing for like $250 million, I think, and they're suing CNN and the Washington Post, and it is the right thing for these parents to do. And so I don't need to hear what their motives are. They have experienced undue hardship due to untruths being spread about their kids, and they are right to fight back. They're planning more lawsuits, actually, which, I mean, why not? Why not? When the media gets something wrong and they issue these teensy little retractions, that's not working for these kids. That's not working for what these kids have experienced. And the other part of the big deal for me is the media will do this again in a heartbeat. They did it this time, and they would do it again. They don't need anything really to destroy someone's life. They'll just, oh, look at this video, look at this snippet of the video, not even going so far as to say, well, what's on the other two sides of this video? Is there any video from before it or after this clip that we need to see before we go forward with this story? It's like, ooh, MAGA hats, let's destroy these kids. They've got to be horrible kids. And there have been some stories where, kids have been caught, wearing blackface and doing Nazi salutes and all that. And kids are going to do, they're going to play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Sure. But to destroy them and to say we need to utterly destroy them for the rest of their lives over a mistake they made in high school, I didn't think that was who we were as a country, as Barack Obama used to like to say. That's not who we are. So, yeah. When we were talking about H.R. 1 last hour, we were talking with John York about this bill that would, basically enshrine the Democrats for utter control for the remainder of our natural lives. It kind of puts me in the mind of this story over at the BBC about North Koreans and how they're forced to vote. They had to vote in what are called no-choice parliamentary elections. So North Koreans are voting to elect the country's rubber stamp parliament, the second such election since Kim Jong-un took power. They vote for the Supreme People's Assembly, SPA, because they have to. There's no choice of candidates. There is no dissent. Turnout is 100%. Approval for the governing alliance is unanimous. And you have to show complete devotion to the family and the current leader. On election day, the entire population age 17 or older has to come out and vote. You have to turn up early, there are long lines, and you wait until your turn and you receive a paper ballot with one name on it. You take the paper, put it into the ballot box, and you're done. Totalitarianism. The Democrats would love that here. All right, when we get back, we'll have more for you. Stay there.
In a move most Christians probably never expected to see, Walmart has created and is promoting a Facebook video ad that normalizes homosexual relationships. And they need to hear from you. The ad is part of a campaign released on Valentine's Day called Love is in the Aisle, a dating show at Walmart. Episode 2 features Pat and Andy, two homosexual men on a blind date as they meet at the store and shop together and discover whether or not they're compatible. Please sign the American Family Association petition to Walmart asking them to remove this pro-homosexual video and remain neutral on controversial issues. It's clear that Walmart is on the path to elevating homosexual relationships to the same level as the male-female model of marriage. Sam Walton must be turning over in his grave. Let Walmart hear from their Christian customers. We'll present the petition at corporate headquarters March 20th. Please sign our Walmart petition today at afa.net. That's afa.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
For the last few decades, we've been scolded by everyone from radical environmentalists to simple back-to-the-nature advocates that we have overly industrialized society. It must be dismantled. We need to adopt the ways of the past. I thought about this when reading a commentary by Jeffrey Tucker. He was watching a video by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was trying to explain why the Earth is headed for an ecological disaster and why we probably shouldn't be having any more children. But he says he was distracted because she was saying all this while carefully cutting sweet potatoes before putting them in the oven. She put salt and pepper on them. Tucker reminds us that salt was so rare during most of human history that it was often regarded as money. Then we figured out how to produce and distribute salt to every table of the world. She was cutting the sweet potatoes with a steel knife. It took generations of metallurgists to figure out how to make steel reliably and affordably. Before steel, there were bodies of water you could not cross without a boat because no one knew how to make an iron bridge that wouldn't sink. She put the sweet potatoes in an oven, but Tucker reminds us that she didn't have to chop down trees and build a fire like 99.99% of humanity had to until relatively recently. And where did she get those sweet potatoes? No one grows them in Washington, D.C. Where did the store get them? Until fairly recently, the sweet potato was trapped in distant places. Now they're flown on planes and shipped in ocean liners and brought to the store by trucks. All of those modes of transportation use fossil fuels. His point is something I've noticed. Many Americans, including members of Congress, enjoy the fruits of technology and capitalism, but at the same time want to eliminate the technological developments and free market benefits that provided them. It is short-sighted at best. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest. She's a freelance, really just jack of all trades speaker. She has a podcast, a District of Conservation, I believe it's called, and she's an avid hunter and fisher and supporter of the Second Amendment. Gabriella Hoffman, media strategist and political commentator. Gabriella, thanks for joining the show today.
Always delighted to come back on. Thank you for having me, Stacy.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. I'm really kind of pumped up about what you've been doing with conservation and the things that you've been able to really, it's something that I don't think enough people really appreciate, that hunters and fishers conserve so much of our environment and are an integral part of maintaining our ecosystem and even combating some of the things that people on the left side of the aisle, claim to want to do for the environment. Hunters and fishers actually do these things in the course of what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, according to recent figures, excise taxes that are collected on firearm purchases, hunting licenses, fishing licenses, tackle, archery, bows, things of that sort, that results in about 60% of conservation funding that goes back to the state wildlife agencies once they're collected by the Department of Interior. So hunters and anglers do put their money where their mouth is and are actually the hidden environmentalists that sadly get pigeonholed and told that their lifestyle is actually counterintuitive to the environment. So it's an interesting dichotomy that you have there in terms of what hunters and anglers do in terms of true conservation efforts and, sadly, what environmentalists claim to do, but they don't put their money where their mouth is. So I think for conservatives, it's important we do jump on this issue, especially because most people who are consumers of the great outdoors, especially hunting and fishing, tend to vote Republican and be politically conservative. That's according to a National Wildlife Federation 2012 report. So you already naturally have people who vote our way and think like us philosophically, who recreate these lands and public waterways and even private lands too. But oftentimes you don't get them really touted as environmentalists unless they tend to vote Democrat, which is really sad. So everyone, regardless of your political orientation, should have an equal footing in the conservation dialogue. And that's kind of what my goals are, in my consulting work, but also my foray into outdoor riding in the last few years, is trying to bridge that gap and see that conservatives can have a involvement in this issue. It's a critical issue that should unite people and does unite people across different political stripes. But we don't want to be told that believing in free markets, having a more limited government view, and supporting Second Amendment rights excludes us from that conversation. And that's what you see a lot of people who talk conservation tend to do, unfortunately.
You know, you make such fantastic points about the way that, so it's kind of like a quiet army of people who don't really go out and do marches or maybe, do vocal protests or any of that. But they do vote. But the thing that they're doing that is so important is, as you said, they're funding through their purchase of items from the permits to everything they use when they're doing hunting and fishing. They're funding a tax. It's a stream of revenue that helps to preserve the environment. They're also physically involved in preserving the environment through the hunting and the fishing and the things that they do while they're hunting and fishing. And then on top of all that, you're pointing out that these are people who are true environmentalists, meaning it's not a cause for them that they would change their minds on the way that they do things. It's really the way they live. It's a part of who they are and how they live in the United States and preserve everything we see around us. These hunters and fishers are silently doing all of that.
Absolutely, and they don't need to brag about their accomplishments. A lot of people just want to be left alone, but you see, especially in previous administrations, I would say arguably under the Obama administration, you had a lot of efforts to erode the hunting heritage. You see a lot of radical environmentalist groups like the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Environmental Defense League, Patagonia, even most recently when they were upset about President Trump asking for scaling back of certain national monuments that actually were in excess against an existing law, the Antiquities Act, which governs how presidents can either shrink or increase the size or establish the size of national monuments. And it's just, and conservatives and people who vote Republican who are outdoorsy feel sidelined because there's all this overwhelming pressure and they don't want to dabble into environmentalism because oftentimes they're told they're only going to be liked if they adopt a radical environmentalist light attitude, which some people who are conservative sadly do, or they're just taken out of the equation altogether. But in my foray into the outdoor industry, I have talked with people of different political views who don't want to infringe hunting access and who don't want to infringe fishing access as well. So there are many people who are interested, but they're like lone wolves in their movement, unfortunately. But I do think there's a huge opportunity, especially with a lot of the policy positions that the Trump administration is putting forth. And even if you don't necessarily support his agenda wholeheartedly, there's so much good that's coming out of it for sportsmen. It's a lot more true conservation. There's a lot of natural resources stewardship that calls for mixed use of exploration, not too much development or too much preservation, which calls for no development. And I think that mixed system should be encouraged without obviously developing every certain thing. Everyone wants a bit of wilderness in nature to exist so future generations can enjoy the outdoors, go fishing, take a nice hike, explore their surroundings, and deplug from their technology. No one is calling for a total abolition of that. And Republicans sadly get painted as enemies of the environment when their funding, their support of those activities tend to point to the opposite. So Democrats have to be more charitable to them, especially to those who hunt and fish, since they tend to vote Republican and be conservative, as I mentioned, and allow them to have an equal seat at the table. And I think certain people are realizing that, and I think Republicans as a whole are becoming more comfortable, and even non-political people are starting to see that various state legislatures across the country have been putting into place various different bills to ban predator hunting, which helps with management, especially of coyotes. And they even want to go after field trials, which are activities for bird dogs to train them for harsher conditions, for retrieving birds, whether it's ducks or upland bird. And also it goes after winter dogs, sled dogs, if you live in Alaska or some colder region. So they're slowly chipping away at the hunting heritage. And unfortunately, a lot of these people who are proposing this anti-hunting legislature in Mexico, New Mexico, New York, Wisconsin, Montana, New Jersey, and 2 other states so far, and Oregon, and I forget what the other one is. But a lot of these states that shifted from red to blue recently have been pushing forth these crazy anti-hunting legislation. And much like we have talked about in previous interviews on gun legislation, especially gun control, you see elements of the left trying to do this incrementalism to slowly chip away at the hunting heritage as well. So that should be a clarion call for people to pay attention to what's happening in their state legislatures on top of what's happening federally, and getting involved regardless of where their politics stand, if they are a sportsman or sportswoman.
Okay, so again, if you are just tuning in, we're chatting with Gabriella Hoffman, media strategist and political commentator, and she's really laying out the case for us not to be silent. And I just want to echo what you said, because you really put it in terms that everyone can understand, that it's not enough to say, well, I'm a conservationist, I'm an angler, and I contribute in that way. I appreciate that. It's so needed. And I can't say enough how there's a lot of people get, your kind of rock star status if you're supporting the Second Amendment and you do that. But supporting conservation efforts and keeping access open for people to hunt and to fish is integral to preventing the overgrowth, overpopulation of predators and an imbalance in our ecosystem. And this is not like, sometimes I call people who get crazy about stuff that they believe in alarmists, like climate alarmists. you know what I mean? It's like they're not
Right.
just concerned about preventing something or being responsible. They want to do drastic changes that would actually harm people and harm the environment. And environmentalists have become alarmists, where they're no longer concerned
Absolutely.
with keeping things clean, right? They're not concerned with cleaning up water. They're fine with spills. They're fine with killing millions of birds with wind power, even though wind power is not a viable source for sustained energy usage for our population at its current size. So what you're talking about is common sense. In addition to doing the things that you may totally love and enjoy, the hunting, the fishing, it's the voting that we have to pay attention to as well, to preserve the mechanism by which people get to hunt and to fish.
Yeah, and making sure your lawmakers who are representing you aren't voting your rights away, not only for your guns, but also for you to partake in your hunting heritage. And maybe many of your listeners don't know this, although there's no amendment that enshrines the right to hunt in this country. Individual states, I think close to 30 states across the country, or maybe more, I will get you the correct number, but a good handful, dozens of states across the country have a right to hunt and fish amendment enshrined in their individual state constitutions. In Virginia, we have that.
Wow.
North Carolina was just the most recent state to adopt it. I believe Missouri may have it. Many different states have it, and some states may have that amendment apply to both hunting and fishing, or only just to fishing. They usually don't only just have it to hunting. Usually hunting and fishing go together, but if it's a state like California, for instance, they only have a right to fish amendment, I believe, enshrined in their constitution. But there are actually certain provisions at the state level, which I think is fine to have that. Individual states can decide that. But if they have that constitutional amendment and you see your lawmakers actually voting in things against it, you can cite that and say, what are you doing? You're going against the Constitution of our state, voting this essential piece of our heritage away. So it's about being proactive, being vigilant, much like on the gun issue, but even just for something that relates to your lifestyle. And the outdoor recreation industry recently was just tabulated to comprise about 2% of the gross domestic product. The people who partake in hunting, fishing, boating, hiking, anything related to the outdoors, they are actually big contributors to the economy. Billions of dollars are generated each year, and now it's finally recognized in the GDP. So they don't obviously occupy most of the GDP, but they're starting to be players in the GDP, and people should listen to how outdoor recreationalists think and what their perspectives are, especially those who thrive and rely on and live off the land. If they're more rural, or even people who live in urban areas like myself who partake in these activities and go outside just to relieve stress and to have fun and introduce people to the joy of it, to not get so suckered into their technology. But anyone can be outdoorsy. There's no prerequisite to it. Doesn't matter your racial background, doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, whether you're a late adopter or an early adopter, anyone can enjoy the outdoors, and it does bring people together, and it really strengthens family ties. I was able to bond with my dad, and I still do to this day because we went fishing together and still do go fishing. And so many people have that bond between their parents and them to not get hooked and suckered into drugs, to partake in different bad life choices that could impede their career or impede their decisions in the future. So it really is a good deterrent to bad behavior. If you're law-abiding, you buy your licenses, you practice ethics, and just really learn what a conservationist is and not simply just talk about it either. But there's just so much value to learning how to fish, learning how to hunt, hiking, foraging. I love going foraging for mushrooms just because my family's from Eastern Europe, and it's a cool thing to do to forage for wild things if you know that they're not lethal and poisonous, of course.
Yeah.
There's just so much,
gotta have some training.
There's just so much. There's just so much you can learn beyond your office or beyond the Twitter space. For instance, these days, and people are missing out on real life by just not partaking in the outdoors. And they don't have to go gung-ho. They don't have to be a fly angler. They don't have to buy deep-sea fishing trips or go on African safaris or go bear hunting for bears. You can start simple and start small. And by default, a lot of Republicans do support this and do this, but they just have had a difficulty with trying to find their way in the conversation and do it while keeping their principles in mind, but also being taken seriously. So anyway, I can help people in our movement. That's kind of my goal. I try to consult. I'm consulting some state lawmakers in a state nearby about how to be effective on digital branding. So if any lawmakers out there want to help with digesting hunting and fishing conservation language and efforts, like I'm available for hire. I do training all across the country to help people really message effectively on that, not just people on our side, but also the greater causes too, like the great outdoors. So I want to make myself available to people who are interested in how to message that to Republicans and to young people too.
And I want to point people to her Instagram. She and I are, I mean, we're connected in a ton of different ways, but my favorite channel of yours is your Instagram account. She's at Gabriella _ Hoffman, at Gabriella _ Hoffman. And she has great content on there. So you're not only going to see pics of Gabby hunting and foraging and doing, all the cool stuff, but you'll see links to some of her work for her writing and things like that, so you can keep up with the topics that Gabriella is covering. You can also find her on Twitter. I think you're pretty consistent. You're at Gabriella Hoffman _ at Gabriella _ Hoffman. And what I encourage you to do is just get on there, take a look at what she's doing, and certainly if you have an organization or a legislator that you think would benefit from the training, you're going to want to get in and because she's hotly in demand over here, operating out of Washington, D.C., but she travels, so she can come to you and do the training. And I've caught snippets of all the good stuff, and it's really, it's just a pleasure to have someone. You're presenting this information. Obviously, you're right-leaning, but this is information that can be absorbed by anyone, regardless of politics.
Absolutely.
We're talking about conserving our environment and doing it in ways that doesn't infringe on people's freedoms and having fun. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get much better than that. Gabby Hoffman, media strategist, political commentator, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Stacy. I hope I get to see you sometime soon again. It's been a while.
I know, and we missed each other at CPAC, but I was in and out. I came to broadcast, and then I was right back out again Friday night. But I will. We're going to have dinner and drinks next time I'm in D.C.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me, and thank you for hearing me out today.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk again soon. Gabriella Hoffman, have a good week. All right, we'll be back with more right after this. Stuffy Stacy today. Stay there.
2018 was the busiest year ever for 8 Days of Hope.
Steve Tiber.
Over 6,000 volunteers descended to Southeast Houston over a 3-week period during 8 Days of Hope 14, 15, and 16, and helped over 1,000 families rebuild their homes, all in the name of Jesus. Also, Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina. We had volunteers, leaders, and equipment in New Bern, Fayetteville, and Wilmington. And then, of course, Hurricane Michael striking the panhandle of Florida. We were in Panama City Beach for 5 weeks, loving and serving families who had nowhere to turn. 2019 could even be busier as we plan to go back to some of these same communities to be a glimpse of who Jesus is by using the gifts he's given us to bless those who are looking for a glimmer of hope. Go to 8daysofhope.com, submit your email address, and we'll notify you of our plans in 2019.
American Family Association is pleased to partner with 8 Days of Hope, and you can too. Learn more at 8daysofhope.com.
Be the hands and feet of Jesus.
In life, you may find yourself wearing different hats. You may wear the hat of a father, judge, caregiver, or wife. The list goes on. But with each hat, we are not to allow the name on that particular hat to be our main identity. Have you ever begun to place your confidence in the names of one of your hats more than having your identity in Jesus? I know I have. When our significance is placed in the title of a hat, we will always fall short because we are imperfect beings. But when our identity is in Jesus Christ, whether we fail the next test in school or don't quite meet the deadline at work, it will not affect our confidence in God. Colossians chapter 3 verse 12 tells us that we are chosen of God, holy and truly loved. Our identity needs to be secured in Christ and He alone. Find and meditate on the scriptures that tells you who you are in Him, and you better wear that hat. I'm today's urban woman, Victory Hollyfield. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is House Call for Health. Baseball fans were saddened to hear the news that Hall of Fame pitcher Tom Seaver is suffering from dementia. Many of us have seen and watched helplessly as a loved one shows signs of dementia, including a decline in short-term memory and repeating themselves. It's such a common situation that you might think that if you live long enough, dementia is inevitable. But researchers say that's not necessarily true. A new study from Australia finds that good nutrition can play a major role in brain health. Many health experts believe a diet that's rich in green leafy vegetables, whole grains, and olive oil, but limited in red meat, can help keep your mind sharp. The study published in the journal Alzheimer's and Dementia found this kind of diet reduced the chances of developing what doctors call, quote, mild cognitive impairment or dementia. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Joy Piazza, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Over the past few days, Venezuelans have been thrown literally into darkness thanks to a massive electrical blackout. Patients awaiting treatment in hospitals are dying. Food is rotting. Telecommunications networks are entirely collapsing. It's worth spending just a minute on how we got here. Nicolas Maduro promised Venezuelans a better life in a socialist paradise. And he delivered on the socialism part, which has proved time and time again is a recipe for economic ruin. The paradise part, not so much. No nation has done more to sustain the death and daily misery of ordinary Venezuelans, including Venezuela's military and their families, than the communists in Havana. Cuba is the true imperialist power in Venezuela. The Cuban government of Miguel Diaz-Canel provides political cover for Maduro and his henchmen so that they may stay in power.
So we're talking about people who are spending hours and hours and hours lined up to get access to substandard health care, and these people are suffering under the jackboot of socialism, and just saying it makes it so that, you know, you just get shot down. So I feel for the people in Venezuela, because even when we send them our aid, they're not getting it. The Maduro regime is preventing our aid from getting in there, and these people deserve an opportunity to bounce back. It's so sad. It's so sad what they're going through. So what we have to do is we can keep praying for them. We can keep sending the aid down there, and we can keep hoping for the best. Now, I know there's Women's History Month this month, and I know that, you know, for me, I hate that we have relegated Black History to the month of February instead of having it all year round. And I posted a bunch of really encouraging things during Black History Month about how America's the best place to be a Black person, and that the opportunities are here, and that all we have to do is just take them. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And if you looked at the Black History Month post that I did on Facebook, you'll see they were uplifting, encouraging stories of Americans who've made a difference or accomplished things, who happen to be Black, who they're an example of what you can do in this country. And there's so many people. That's why a month is just ridiculous. And it's the same for Women's History Month. It's as if to say that we don't study women in history. We do. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but I wanted to point to, and I just tweeted it out to say thanks to Gabby for coming on today. I tweeted out her article about Women's History Month, and she wrote that women aren't politically monolithic and women don't feel that Democrats represent them. Yeah, a majority of women are Democrats, but there's a huge plurality of women in this country who are Republicans, and they don't feel well represented by Democrats. And it's perfectly fine for there to be women of every political persuasion, but the Republican women are not. They're not acknowledged. They're not represented. When you see the awards that go out for women, they always have women who are Democrats. They never award anything to any Republican women. It's as if it's a statement about the lack of accomplishments of Republican women, but that's just not true. It is not true. So there's also this ridiculous assertion that white women shouldn't vote for Republicans. And there was this article, Gabby points to an article that was in Vogue, where they said the latest gut punches, courtesy of CNN polling, in the Georgia governor's race, an estimated 75% of white women, even more than white men, voted for Republican Brian Kemp, who is passionately pro-life, over Stacey Abrams, who is a staunch protector of what they call women's reproductive rights. No, she's a supporter of abortion. And Republican women tend to be against abortion, and they tend to be single issue voters, meaning they place one issue as paramount above all the rest. And then, so you can check the tick boxes for other issues, but you start off with, is the person pro-life or not? And if they're not, they're automatically off your list. That is the same way that Democrats consider abortion. They look and see if someone's pro-abortion, and if they are pro-abortion, then they're like, okay. And so they almost don't care what else the person is standing for. What's like, who cares? So independent thinking women are turned off by socialist origins and a similar holiday. Coinciding with Women's History Month is International Women's Day, which sadly has socialist origins, which is why if you look at my social media, I didn't celebrate International Women's Day. I'm not an international woman. I'm an American, right? So, thanks, but no thanks. I don't need that. International Women's Day, according to the people who support it, is all about unity, celebration, reflection, advocacy, action, whatever that looks like globally at a local level. It's been occurring for well over a century and continues to grow from strength to strength, but it leaves out conservatives, independents, pro-life, women, and anybody who's not basically a socialist is left out of, International Women's Day, which is why I didn't celebrate it. It's not for me, okay? Politically and culturally underrepresented women are, they claim represented this month. How about just representing people? And I know there are, there's always this pushback. Well, men have dominated this and that, and so therefore we need to celebrate women. Well, we've completely reversed that trend. More women are graduating from college than men. More women by a large number. We're talking about over 70% of the people pursuing doctorates are women. And you might say, well, that's the way it should be. Let the men take a back seat for a while. Are you married to a man? Do you have any sons? Do you have any brothers? It's not good in America for the majority of the people who are earning the higher salaries to be women, because it disincentivizes marriage and drives down the birth rate. So this is a conversation for people who can think further than the end of their nose. You have to be able to look ahead and say, I see trouble coming. What do we have to do to reverse that trend? The trend in between human relations between men and women is that women seek men for marriage who make more money than they do, who have a potential of earning and supporting a family so they can feel comfortable taking off from work and, having a baby or 2 or 3. Well, you can't do that if you don't feel like your spouse is going to be able to support you. So one of the most important things that has to happen is for people to have an understanding of where this leads to. Some people will be fine with it. Some people will say women should be the breadwinners, men should stay home. But that is not the traditional way that men and women interact, and it's not something that's sustainable over time. And so when we see statistics about the suicide rate or different groups not doing well in this country, and you see people online on Twitter celebrating that, yeah, this group of people are killing themselves and that's good. That's idiocy. We don't want any group of people in our country to be more prone to suicide. We don't want to see suicide increasing. We don't want to see marriage decreasing. And we certainly don't want to see the current trend, which is out of wedlock births. And women who are professionals now, instead of seeing it as a stigma to be a single parent, they're like, well, I've done everything else on my own. I'm going to do this on my own too. And intentionally bringing children into single parent households. It's statistically not favorable. The kids are always wondering, where's my dad? Why don't I have a dad? And it creates and sets up this false sense, well, I was able to do my career on my own and I was able to get my degree and all that on my own, and now I'm going to make a family on my own and I'm going to raise a child. It's not all it's cracked up to be. It's upsetting. And then what do women do? They start looking at the government and saying, well, the government should give me paid leave. The government should, provide this service and that service. I need a better this, I need a better that. And we need to get the government to force my employer to do it because there are no men in their life, no husband, no one to, the sink is leaking, no one to fix that. And so your answer is, well, I can fix the sink. Of course you can. Can you do it if you're a single mom and you have, baby to look after and you have to work all day? And when you get home and feed the baby and do everything else has to do all the laundry yourself, do all the car repairs yourself, you also have time to fix the sink? Well, I'll call a plumber. Of course you will. I mean, if you're making that much money, you can blunt the effects of single parenthood. But the truth is, why would you want to? Why do you want to raise a child by yourself? Why do you want to live your entire adult life alone, going it by yourself and just you and a child? And why do you want to set yourself up to be the person who has to answer those questions? Where's my dad? Why don't I have a dad? Why are we not like, this family or that family? Because as prevalent as single parenthood has become, the 2-parent model is still the ideal, and kids know it, single parents know it, and to intentionally go into that, it's folly. So we need to discourage that. It's a great piece by Gabriella, and I kind of took it off on a tangent, but the link is on my Twitter feed. You can definitely go there and click on it and read through. It's really good stuff. And so I mentioned the North Korean parliament. To me, it's a scandal. They have all the people outside on voting day, and what they do is they make people show up to vote. They also have people out with pom-poms and festive colored paper and streamers and ribbon to cheer, to act as if this mandatory activity is something that people should be excited about. So there's a voting booth where you can vote in private. Remember I was talking about how they get a sheet of paper with only one slate of names on it. You don't get to change anything. You just take the piece of paper, you take it over to the box, and you put it in, and that's you voting. You're not really voting because the decision's already been made. So you put it in the ballot box, which is located in the open. But then there's also a voting booth where you can do this mandatory behavior in private. But doing it in private raises immediate suspicion, so no one does it. Now, you theoretically have the right to cross out the single candidate, but doing that most certainly means the secret police will go after you and declare you legally insane. Once you leave the polling station, you're expected to join the cheering groups outside to express your happiness about having been able to cast your vote for the wise leadership of the country. In state media, election days are portrayed as festive events with people outside each polling station celebrating. But because the voting is obligatory, the election also works as a census for the authorities to monitor the population of each constituency and to track defectors who might have fled to China since the last election. Did you hear that? the people are made to come out and vote in sham elections where they don't have a choice. And also, it's an involuntary census where they can take your name and your address and make sure that you're still in the country. So you might be wondering, well, what powers does this mandatory parliament have? The Supreme People's Assembly, SPA. Well, they're a rubber stamp body with no power. They're elected every 5 years. They're the only legislative body in North Korea. And the SPA has zero power. Zero power. Their laws are written by the party apparatus, and then the SPA just rubber stamps them. They don't get to say what's in the laws or change anything. They can't even make, like grammatical changes. Now, the SPA doesn't even meet regularly. In their first meeting, they elect a much smaller body to work in their stead. The original assembly only comes together on rare occasions. And so then they make all these announcements afterwards. After they hold this election, they make these announcements about how there was this impressive turnout. That in 2014, they had 99.97 people voting. And this is what Democrats use as proof that these systems are better than the American system, where you have a choice to vote and we have lower turnout. The reason these people are turning out is because they don't want to be attacked by the police. They don't want to be declared insane. They don't want to be forced into labor or servitude or disappear in the middle of the night. So a few people might be ill and, not vote. But the joke in North Korea is on election day, no one dies and everyone is in good health. Then Kim Jong-un releases constituency numbers. Both turnout and political support of Kim Jong-un are normally reported at 100%. Then they publish results for the other constituencies. Turnout might be a few percentage points lower, but political support for the candidates in each constituency are again bound to be 100%. And that's the voting process in North Korea, a communist nation where the people are essentially slaves and cannot leave. You can't say, I no longer want to be a citizen of North Korea. Not and live. This is absolutely crazy town. But it's going on in North Korea. It is the way that they have to live. So, it's depressing. And it's a reason why we should be doing everything in our power to preserve our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and our liberties that we enjoy here in America. It's why this show is about politics and culture, all from the Christian worldview. All right. Have a fantastic evening, and I'll be back with you tomorrow, Lord willing. Have a great night.